girls, grab your beers.
Hey everybody, this is Charlie from Anthrax, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle.
This is Mark Metcalf, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle with Bailey on Domain Cleveland Radio.
You are listening to today's Boondoggle with Bailey on Domain Cleveland Radio. Yes, Kato Kalin listens to this all the time.
Welcome to today's Boondoggle. Now here's your host.
I am Monty Heath, so1 Heath, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle.
Hey, what's up? It's John from Skillet, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle on Domain Cleveland Radio.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Incarceration, America's rock, metal, and tattoo festival with Slipknot. Falling in Reverse, Five Finger Death Punch, plus Marilyn Manson, 3 Days Grace, Beartooth, Knocked Loose, Lamb of God, Parkway Drive, I Prevail, In This Moment, and so many more. Report to the Ohio State Reformatory on July 18th through 20th, 2025 to face your sentencing. 3 days of rock, tattoos, and the return of the Haunted Blood Prison. Passes for Incarceration are on sale now at incarceration.com. Zombified.
What's going on, everybody? It's Bill Bailey with today's Boondoggle. And real quick housekeeping note, if you're watching us on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, or Odyssey, please hit that follow and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever podcast platforms you utilize, please hit that follow and subscribe button so we can continue bringing you conversations like the one I'm bringing you today. I am catching up. I'm doing some time with the Lord Zane today. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Another not sunny day in Los Angeles, California. I don't know why it's been gloomy the last couple of days, but still going. Can't complain. There's no snow on the ground, so
yeah, probably a lot of smoke though. Still, huh?
It's cleared up, thankfully. Now it's not really around anymore. I mean, we've pretty much made it past that. We actually got some rain a couple of days ago, so we made it through another one, barely, but we did it.
Good to hear, man. Good to hear. Well, hey, usually when I have people on for the first time, I want to get a quick background. So, before you became the Lord, what did little Matt originally want to be when he grew up?
13 years old, man. I wanted to be a rock star, but I was also really introduced early to film. I was given a video camera when I was really young, and that's really odd for the 80s. I'm dating myself, but yeah, it's not like today where everybody has like a video camera on their phone. So I was always wanted to be a rock star, but was making films from a very early age, like, 10, 11, 12 years old. So kind of both, filmmaker, musician, rock star.
Gotcha. And then, I know, we're going to get into your documentary, but you started kind of playing music at an early age. Who were some of those early influences that got you learning to play music?
Well, any kid in the 80s, I think the very first guy was Michael Jackson in that Thriller album. I actually saw that tour, the Victory Tour in 84, 85. Again, dating myself, but that was like a really big deal. And same time as that album was RUN-DMC, Raising Hell. And then, of course, the other big one was Van Halen, and they had the 1984 album came out. That was huge. Those were my initial three, like, really big influences and loves in music. But then from there, it obviously got into so many other things that were popular in the 80s, everything from the Big Four to, Guns N' Roses. And then, I got into Iggy Pop and Alice Cooper and obviously the Doors and Led Zeppelin and, all the classic rock stuff, Pink Floyd. So I had a lot of influences, but those first three really did it to me as a kid: Michael Jackson, Run-DMC, and Van Halen.
Nice. And then, as I mentioned, you were doing, you had a video camera and started filming. Like, who were some of your inspirations on that route?
As far as filmmaking, I was just like really into the strange stuff as a kid, like David Lynch and David Cronenberg. And, I really loved movies like The Wall, and Angel Heart with Robert De Niro and Mickey Rourke. I loved horror, like, Evil Dead 2. I loved sci-fi, Blade Runner, all those things. But for whatever reason, I've never really made a feature film. So my fascination in film more originally started off in the documentary style. And I don't necessarily know why that was. I just think it was because I just loved the aspects of documenting what was going on. And I used to absolutely love like those old rock and roll documentaries, like Decline of Western Civilization 1 and 2. Those were a really big influence on me in the 80s. And then what other various things came out at that time, just, really piqued my interest. And that unfortunately kind of got put on a back burner for many, many years, but it absolutely started probably with Decline of Western Civilization, and then with Decline of Western Civilization Part 2.
Gotcha. And then, as we're talking about, you're doing now your own documentaries getting ready to come out, covering your time in Society1 and with the band. When did Society1 come together for you originally?
1996 was our first show, so it's been a while. I was on the scene in LA prior to that. I touch upon it in the movie, but a lot of people obviously don't know this, because why would they? But I was actually on the scene in LA the exact same time as Korn, Incubus, Weezer, and something I was going to talk about in the movie, but they're just, there's time restrictions and there's only so many things you can cover. I actually went to school with Rivers from Weezer. We were in big band together when he actually got signed. So I sat behind him in big band for a year. And then I knew the guys from Incubus for years. I was around them. I have some really funny stories, back in the day, being on the same scene and same shows and so on and so forth as those guys. And then obviously, when Korn came into town, I mean, they were a little bit down south, but they eventually, got up into LA. So I was, around the same time, those guys, I literally playing the same clubs, a week after, same weekend, whatever. So I was around at that point in the LA scene, but Society1 actually didn't start until around 96.
Gotcha. And I'm always curious about like band names and stuff. What was the inspiration behind Society1?
I mean, I once was shooting something for the drummer John Densmore for The Doors. I was actually over at his house and I was shooting like a commercial for some type of environmental thing that was going on over in France. I actually don't remember what it was. And we started talking after I shot him, and I was just like, "Hey, man, you're in one of my favorite bands ever, if not my favorite band ever, and this and that." And then he kind of started asking me about my band, and he goes, "Oh, Society1, what's that about?" And nobody had asked me that question probably in about 20 years, and I forgot. I didn't really know what to tell him, so I made sure to remember it after that. And Society1, I think initially it was just the idea of just kind of like creating a new society. And, being that I came out of the adult industry and I was incredibly into the groupie culture and the porn star culture, a lot of it was just based upon the idea of hedonistic lifestyles and debauchery and basically just obsession with the flesh. So it was just the idea of like this new society that was going to be, based on, hedonism, I guess, in a sense, to put it plainly. And that was it. That was the idea of Society1, the number one society.
Nice. Well, yeah. And as the documentary covers, man, everyone dies. Rock and roll or rock stars don't count. That's getting ready to come out that features this. There's definitely a lot of that showing that lifestyle in there. What now? I mean, I guess for timeline purposes, though, it's like you were playing in the band, but when did your time in the adult film industry come to be?
It was almost immediate, because what ended up happening was when I was playing those clubs, And I knew the dudes in Incubus and, Weezer, and I knew of Korn. I didn't know them initially back then. Later, a couple years later, I met them. They all got signed. And I talk about this in the movie. I specifically remember going to class one day, and Rivers from Weezer was like, yeah, we just got signed. And I remember when Incubus got signed. And I remember when Korn got signed, even though I didn't know them personally. And when all those guys got signed and my band didn't, I kind of just gave it up for a year. And in that year is when I entered the adult industry around 1995. And then I had the ability in terms of being able to do something that was a little more out of the ordinary a year later, just because of the resources I had with the money and the women. And that's when I decided to start Society1 up, get back into music. So the Society1 and the adult industry were almost simultaneous. Prior to that, I wasn't in Society1. I was playing in bands and stuff like that. But that was the whole point. When I got back into music, I was just kind of wow, I got to do something that's really crazy and insane, because all these guys that I actually knew got signed and I didn't, and I really kind of felt in a way overlooked. Now, obviously, it was probably most likely because of, who knows exactly why, but people can say your music sucked or you sucked, or maybe it was because there just wasn't A&R people at the same time. Maybe my style in the band was a little too close to one of those other bands. Who knows what it was, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So I was just okay, well, I have, this fascination with shock rock, and I have this ability and this fascination, and I'm in the adult industry, and I was the youngest director in the world at that point. And I just thought, hey, let's just combine all of it, my love of shock rock, my love of music, my love of porn, and just put it all into one and put it out there almost immediately as soon as I got the band together.
Yeah, and that the story is definitely told in the documentary. Now, like you said, you got a camera as a kid, started filming kind of your own stuff. Obviously, that plays a role when you decide to get in the adult film industry, and we're the youngest director that got recognized in the awards and stuff as well, right? So when did Lord Zane Productions start?
Well, Lord Zane Productions was a later offshoot of Zane Productions, which was, the initial company that I got into, which was a production company that was owned by my father. And then I later then started my own production company, and I just kept the name, through the years. When I decided to get back into it, I was just kind of it's always going to follow me. And so I'm just not going to run away from it. I'm just going to make it part of my music video company and my photography company and my EPK company and then ultimately my documentary film company. So it just was a natural progression. The name, Lord Zane, or Matt the Lord Zane, that didn't really happen until my second album was Society1 Exit Through Fear. And I have no idea, why that came about. That I don't remember, but I think it was just because of the meaning of Lord, master, kind of, in the old days when they'd say, oh, my Lord, and they were meant to be like your master, so, it was just something that I just kind of adopted. I don't really think there was anything more to it than, a lot of people that take on not nicknames, but aliases or, whatever. I think it was more along the lines of what Eminem did, he was Marshall Mathers, but then he had the Eminem persona. I think it was more along the same lines of that, but I didn't do it, in 99. I did it in, like a year or two after that. So it was, that's what I think the whole idea was behind it.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I was going to ask you when the Lord moniker came to be. But yeah, it was, watch the opening of the documentary, and there you start out with a lot of shout outs from my dude Jacoby, Papa Roach, obviously toured with them back in the day, had Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit, Wayne Static, rest in peace, was a fan, friendship with Jay Gordon of Orgy, and then even like Dave Navarro, Jane's Addiction's in there. And what caught my ear was like a name drop of Kelly Clarkson being a fan. She doesn't appear on camera, but what's the Kelly Clarkson connection?
Yeah, I actually messed up as far as the not including Kelly in the movie. And technically I have enough time between, now and the release that I could go rectify that situation. The reason why she was mentioned in the movie is because in the beginning, I'm quoting an article by Metal Sucks that's talking about the movie. And the reason why they talked about Kelly Clarkson is because in the initial trailer, Kelly Clarkson was included in it. We met in 2005 during the filming of a reality show, and we actually knew each other. And I still have the footage. I still have us in the reality show together, like talking and doing things together, in the reality show. And initially I had parts of that in the movie, but somehow through time frames and issues and stuff, it just kind of like it hit the cutting room floor, so it didn't make it in there. But yeah, it's the truth. Like I did a reality show with Kelly Clarkson. Now the reality show got struck down, and they obviously didn't let it air because when it went to the networks, they're like, what is Kelly Clarkson, American Idol, doing with the known pornographer / suspension artist, Matt Zane or Lord Zane? Like, we can't have this get out there. And it was a really big deal at the time. So, I kind of wish that it was included, but when you're in production like this, things are just going to be left out because there's only so much money and there's only so much time, and that was just one of the unbelievable aspects that didn't make the movie. Another aspect was, like you said, Papa Roach. They wrote a song about me. That song, I Almost Told You I Love You, was about me. And I have video footage of them that was aired on, various interviews of Jacoby admitting and talking about the fact that, the song was written about me and about my time in the adult industry. And again, I think it's something that maybe I should have, included a little bit more in the movie. But the movie was more about everything seen through the lens of shock rock. It wasn't really a documentary about me, because if it was just about me, the reaction would have been, from most people, who gives a shit? Who's this guy? He's a nobody, because, a lot of people don't know who I am anymore. And then the second part of it would have been, I don't believe it. Like people would have thought that a lot of it was like AI generated. Like, could you imagine, Jacoby, seeing him talk about the fact they wrote that song, I Almost Told You I Loved You, about me? And you can ask him and he'll admit it, but it's on video. I can prove it. Or if I showed me and Kelly Clarkson running around in the studio and outside the studio together and interacting, people would have been like, this isn't real. This couldn't have happened. So, I mean, the movie wasn't, unbelievable moments with this guy you never heard of. The movie was about shock rock through the lens of shock rock. And, the argument basically being, can you do something beyond what anybody else had already done up until that point? Because the whole premise was set up in the beginning of the movie. Alice Cooper and Rob Zombie came out very publicly. You can go Google it. And they said, Rob Zombie said at one point during an interview on VH1, nothing else can be done unless you chop. And then Alice Cooper said, yeah, unless you chop your arm off, and I stated in the beginning, that's not right. Like, you guys don't know who I am. And I get it. It's, I'm not some big star. I'm not even a star, but it's just not true. So when I said that at the beginning, I wanted to prove that there were things in shock rock that not even GG Allin did. And that was the basis for the movie. So, if it got into the idea of what I did with Kelly Clarkson or Papa Roach, it would have deterred a little bit from, what the movie was about. But at the same time, if I edited that part of the intro out, it would have been taking the article that Metal Sucks out of context. And that kind of would have been editing what they put in the article. And then I didn't really want to get, busted for like creative editing. You know what I mean? Like, everything you see in the movie is real. You know what I mean? And that was something that I really wanted to make sure that we kept, 95%. Anything that I talked about that was said, I wanted to show you. I didn't want to edit articles and not be able to show you things that I talked about.
Well, when I was watching it too, it was like it was reminding me of like my time in the military, where it's like, you know, you go to certain ports and you go to certain areas, and then you come home and you tell your friends that never served, like, you're not going to believe this. Let me tell you. And they just got to take your word for it that you witnessed this, or you lived through this and you experienced this. But that your documentary is basically visual proof for people that this really was your life. This was the life I was living on the road. The sex, drugs, and rock and roll life was, you know, epitomized, definitely.
Yeah, you know, like that was the main part of it. I mean, the problem with my life is that it's unbelievable unless you see it. You see, like I am not afforded the same type of, you know, benefit of the doubt with my stories because I'm not famous. I'm not anything in the music industry. I'm a nobody. See, so like when you watch an interview with Alice Cooper, who I love, who's a legend, and, you know, he has a very famous story that he tells you about meeting Elvis and how he pulled a gun on Elvis and Elvis karate kicked him and, you know, all this stuff. And there's no proof that he ever met Elvis. There's no proof that this interaction ever happened. You know, you just take your word for it, but you believe it because it's Alice Cooper. But I'm not Alice Cooper, so nobody's going to believe anything that I say. So when I made this movie, I went, okay, I know what I did. I know what actually happened, but what can I prove? So we opened the vault up and we went through, you know, 500, 1,000 hours of footage, whatever it was, and said, okay, well, you know, this one time the stage collapsed with 100 people that rushed the stage. Well, we couldn't find that, so we're not going to include that story. You know, there was another time when, you know, something else happened. I don't remember what it was, but we actually went out to all these people all over the internets, you know, hey, do you have any footage of this? Do you have any footage of that? And if we couldn't find it, we just said, okay, we're just not going to include that story. So what I did was I made sure to 95% of it to only include things that I could back up. So by the end of the movie, you could say, well, I hate that guy. He's a piece of garbage. I don't like him. He's a nobody, whatever. But you couldn't argue about what I was saying. If I talked about everything that actually happened, then, you know, the movie would be 3 times as worse as it was. But I had to make that call in the beginning. I had to say, okay, well, you know what? Let's keep it at 95% of what I can actually prove. And unfortunately, you know, the reality is that it was even more crazy than what I discussed. Footage got lost, footage got damaged. We couldn't find footage. So, you know, we just decided to keep it into what could actually be proven.
Yeah. And there's quite a bit for sure. Like I was wondering, like, too, like, I mean, you obviously, you know, you referenced GG Allin and where you were taking a lot of the stage shows, the extremes you were taking it to back then. You know, one of the thoughts was legally, how did you pull that shit off in a live show back then?
Well, I mean, it really wasn't legally. I mean, I have nightmares about going to jail back then because most of it was illegal. And it talks about in the movie a couple things. It shows articles on Blabbermouth, which were actually lifted from Blabbermouth and other articles, saying that I escaped a felony here, I escaped a felony there. I talk about the fact that, you know, I would literally get off stage and go into the trunk of somebody's car and they drive me out of town. So there was a lot of eluding the police and eluding the authorities. You know, why I got so lucky was, you know, I don't know. I don't know how I was able to get away with it. But in the same respect, GG Allin, he did go to jail, but it wasn't for one of his stage performances. So he got away with it too, you know, so there, you know, and it just, I don't know why or how, but I just managed to do it. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. But yeah, it's frightening in retrospect to think about it because, you know, I'll never go out on a limb like that ever again to that extreme ever. I'm too old now. I can't go to jail now. I'll get killed, you know, like, it's just that I wish that more of it was captured. And I wish that, you know, it almost happened at a point when cell phones were around, but maybe not, because maybe I would totally be in jail and they'd have all the evidence now. So I don't really know, you know, but I talk about it. I say it in the movie. I say, yeah, it was illegal, you know, and it was. And, you know, and some of the times the cops were actually kind of cool. I mean, some of the times the cops did get me and they're like, we're going to hold on to you and we're going to talk to people before, you know, we decide whether or not to pull you in. And sometimes they let me go because I was in custody sometimes. And all the bands and everybody in the crews that we had out with us were afraid to film it, you know, when it was happening, or I would have included that part in the movie. But again, it's hard to prove. So I don't want to argue with anybody. You know, I didn't want the movie to come out and everybody to go, oh, you know, you're a has-been, you're a nobody. You didn't do this. I didn't see it. So I just didn't want to have that argument. So I was just like, okay, well, I'll talk about it in the interviews like we're doing now. And I'll give a little more insight and behind the scenes. You know, I didn't want to put it in the movie. I mean, my hope, and again, this is probably incredibly far-reaching and far-fetched, but I hope the documentary over the next, you know, 2 to 3 years gets out there, and I hope a really big filmmaker sees it and figures that it would make a great biopic, and then we can go in and, you know, make a movie that includes a lot of the stuff that wasn't included in the documentary and really tell the story, kind of like how they did with the, you know, with the one about the black metal guys, that Mayhem, you know, how they made that movie, you know what I mean? So, you know, we'll see what happens. To me, this is really just the beginning. I have a 3-part series in my brain that I want to talk about in my film. And this was the first installment. You know, there's going to be a movie that I start shooting in a couple months, which I can't disclose now because of the topic and who's involved. And then there's going to be a 3rd film, which is a prequel to this movie that's going to focus solely on those 5 years in the porn industry, because we actually do have more footage of that wasn't included in the movie.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it leaves very little to the imagination. I mean, the masturbation and orgies on stage. I mean, just to name a few, starting shit with the crowd, going out there and like starting fights with the audience and stuff like that. But what was, and then the backstage antics, of course, the backstage slut series and the lunch meat and all that when groceries were still affordable. But the body modification and suspension performance that you ended up adding in and stuff, when did that become something that you were into?
2002 was the first one, you know, that I did. And people, again, because it happened so long ago, they don't realize until they see the movie that had never been done before. You know, like that was the first time a lead singer ever was suspended in a music video, then on stage. And the argument that I make to people is it was so massive and such a groundbreaking and awe-inspiring thing that I ultimately brought it to Download, the biggest festival in the UK. And I, you know, performed in front of 70, 80,000 people, you know, doing it because it was such an out of the ordinary thing. And that was really the peak of the shock rock performances. And that was like, you know, probably my biggest piece of rock history. I mean, that was my thing that nobody had ever done before. Like, you can always point to aspects of performances in each shock rock genre, person that nobody ever did before them. Like, I believe Iggy Pop was the first one ever to cut himself on stage. You know, obviously since then, you know, Sid Vicious did it, and then the guy from the Germs did it, and then obviously GG Allin did it, and then Marilyn Manson did it. But by the time Marilyn Manson did it, there was like 5 guys before him that did it. You know, but then GG Allin was the first guy ever to take a dump on stage. You know what I mean? That was like his thing. He used to also fight the crowd, but he wasn't the first. You know what I mean? There was other guys that did it, you know, prior to him. You know, I believe the Sex Pistols and Henry Rollins. You know, but Gigi then got his credit because he was the first guy to combine, you know, his synthesis of things, and then he took a shit on stage, and that was like, you know, his thing. You know, everybody has like their own thing that happened. Ozzy got really famous because he was the first guy to bite a head off of bat. You know what I mean? Alice Cooper, you know, threw a chicken into the crowd. You know, like they didn't repeat those things, but those were the first guys ever to do it, so they get recognized for that. And my main thing was I did all these other things, but the big thing was the suspensions, you know, and it wasn't just some small thing, and it wasn't just in a music video. I brought it all the way up into a live show. Now, obviously, there was other things in shock rock that I did. I mean, nobody ever ate ass on stage, to put it bluntly, that we feature quite prominently, half jokingly in the movie, because the funny part about it is what's worse, one of your band members tossing your salad or taking a dump on stage. Like, people always say to me, oh, GG Allin's the best. And I agree. I love GG Allin. I was actually talking to Merle, his brother, to be in this movie, and it unfortunately didn't work out. But Suspension wasn't the only thing that I did that nobody ever did before. You will never see a band before or since ever get their salad tossed on stage until my band did it. So, we had a couple of little surprises in there as well, versus, all the other insanity that we would pile into the show.
Yeah, I thought of that Dumb and Dumber scene when they're walking through and they're like, wow, nice butt. He must work out, It was like, good thing you at least provided a nice salad to be tossed,
Yeah, and that wouldn't have been possible without my band members, So yeah, we did a lot of things that had never, been done before. I mean, everybody has their idea of who was the most intense, and I don't care if you think it was GG Allin, who I love, Edwin from Kettle Cadaver, who was probably the most grotesque in terms of self-mutilation, or me, which was probably the most original in terms of body suspension as well as salad tossing. I mean, you can, but I think all three of us have an argument to be up in those top slots. And that's just my opinion, but other people can make arguments for other people, but I don't see it. I personally think you could put any one of us in those top spots, me, GG Allin, or Kettle Cadaver.
Yeah. And then, I like the different time frames you were showing in the video. And if you look like, in the, what you got away with back in the day, and then as you were trying to come back, in 2023 in the today's cancel culture, and what you kept running up against. I mean, there's no way that stuff back in the day would probably fly today. Although I feel like we're at, the culture's on a pendulum, and people are kind of enough of the cancel shit, and now we're about to swing the other direction again. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, look, the tour was horrible, man. It was my least favorite tour I ever went on, the one in the movie. It was what we came up against was, I mean, it just ruined everything. It ruined shooting the movie. I mean, it ruined the experience of trying to come back and doing a tour of that size. I mean, it was not fun. And yeah, I really don't know what else to say about it, because I mean, imagine 3 weeks before the tour and people heard about the fact that we were coming back and they're already trying to get us kicked off the tour. And then we get on there and we're being watched. Like, I mean, like I said in the movie, it was like walking a tightrope, you know what I mean? And all these people wanted to see this stuff because, to just put it out there, we were really blowing up on TikTok at the time. And unfortunately, the algorithms changed fairly after the tour. But prior to that, we were getting, millions of views. So all these new fans were going, "Oh my God, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this," because we were posting all this stuff from the entirety of the career, and they wanted to come out and see something like that. And then, we get out there and we can do about a quarter of what we used to do. So it was kind of disappointing. And I don't think a lot of the people were disappointed because they got to see something. And I talked about that in the movie, but yeah, it was kind of a bummer, like it was supposed to be almost like this celebration, like coming back 20 years later, revisiting, that style, a lot of the props, a lot of the music, a lot of the people, the newer fans that had seen, the TikToks, and it just didn't really end up being that. It just ended up being just kind of just a situation where we were just crippled, like every step of the way, like doing everything that we could just to make sure that we just really couldn't get off and get going.
Well, you had the incredible shrinking stage that you were given on that tour, and then the no fuck clause that came in there.
Yeah, the no fuck clause really happened, man. Like that's a real thing. That we were literally not allowed to fuck in the club. That really happened. And the stage you know, I understand their thought process is if we can confine Matt, you know, me to literally a 12-inch by 12-inch thing. I mean, like, there's not much he could do, you know? And so at first it was maybe a little bit bigger, but then it just got, you know, smaller. And so I was almost like in a cage. And yeah, it was tough, man. I mean, it was hard to pull off performances by just the mere lack of room and the danger of being on stage and you know, not, I mean, it was tough. I mean, and I talk about it in the movie. And then on top of it, quite honestly, was my age. You know, like if I was a little bit younger, I think I could have navigated it a little bit better. But you're trying to pull off a show at my age that compares to something I did 20 years ago, and I'm given 12 inches, you know, to stand on, you know, and not be able to move and whatever. You know, not to give the movie away, but I mean, how many times did I fall off the stage? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, the beginning and the end for sure. And then, I mean, you were even running out of room for the Dick mic stand, you know? Yeah.
You know, like it was crazy, man. Like, yeah, I couldn't even get a mic stand up on there, you know, a lot of the nights. And, you know, it's when you're a performer like me, you know, people get nervous, they get scared. And, you know, I kind of get it. They were just like, man, you know, we don't know what this dude's going to do. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta like protect the tour and protect, you know, their own investments, you know? So, you know, I get it, but you know, it is what it is, you know, like, you know, what are you going to do? You know, like if I didn't want all that trouble and all those problems, I wouldn't be the type of performer that I am. You know what I mean? And why would I expect to come back and try to do a tour in 2023 after what I had done in my past and what I was known for? You know what I mean? Like you have to expect it.
Especially in 2023. But you don't mention it in the documentary. You probably can't mention it now, but are you allowed to say who that tour was with?
You know, like the problem with that is a couple of things. I mean, if you really want to figure it out, you can go figure it out. I'm never going to mention it, the main headlining act. And the reason being is because the band is huge, number one, platinum selling act. And the actual band, when you get to that level, you know, those guys probably had absolutely no idea what was going on. I think that their handlers, I think the managers, the agents,
the gatekeepers.
I think those guys were the ones that were pulling the strings, and I'm pretty sure of it. And I'll tell you why. Because another band that was on that bill was Fear Factory, and I did talk about that in the movie. And in the beginning of the tour, they were having issues too with the higher ups, not the main band, but the people that were running things. But Dino had a lot more power and a lot more influence than me. So he was able to rectify the situation fairly early on in the tour. So I don't think that it was the band, and I didn't want to throw them under the bus. You know what I mean? And while I was on the tour, I didn't want to go bitch and moan and whine to them. You know what I mean? I didn't really want to cause more of a problem than I was already causing. You know what I mean? So I didn't really want to call them out. I would have absolutely called out the actual names of the people causing all the problems, but I didn't want to face lawsuits, you know, so their names were bleeped out. I avoided the names because I know who they were. I could tell you all the names now. I could tell you the multiple tour managers, the agents, the managers. I could tell you who they were, but I don't really think it was necessary for the storytelling. And then, you know, why do that? And then later have to pull the movie because I have a lawsuit running. So I don't take it personally from the band. I think it was more of the people that their handlers and the people that were controlling the tour. And I think the band just shows up and plays the tour and get their paycheck and, you know, makes some music and does the band, you know, artist things. And then I think you have all the heavyweight people that, you know, push all the you know, make it all happen. And I kind of know this for an extra fact because I know of a few other people, and I can't really name drop because I've worked with some big names, but some similar things happen to them, you know, and maybe in a in another year or so, when some other information comes out, I'll talk a little bit more about it. But that's the basic gist of it. I again, if it didn't happen to Dino, I think I would have taken it a little more personally. But I saw it happening to him too, and then he dealt with it, and I just wasn't able to because I just didn't have the same power and pull.
Gotcha. Well, I wanted to jump back on the suspension world that you got involved with. That's kind of got you connected with Dave Navarro, and you did the Download Festival, but you went on to break a world suspension record, beat Criss Angel's record at the time, and it's covered in the documentary. And then he kind of like did his magician stuff and tried to make it disappear like it didn't happen. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just really the theme of the majority of my career. I mean, look, as far as what Criss did to me, again, was some ego involved? Maybe. But really, it's more about just protecting the asset, protecting the brand, like imagine at the time if a guy just came up and beat Criss Angel's big suspension world record and did it in a way with only half as many hooks, what that would have done for his persona. I don't think it really would have been good. And I think his managers and I think the people, came in and said, okay, well, how do we deal with this? Well, he's not a big star. Just ignore him, just deny it, refuse to comment on it. And they were successful because, at that time you had David Blaine, you had Criss Angel, and I was going to come up and start becoming a type of endurance artist. And that was really my foot in the door. And then they basically said, no, let's make sure that we can't allow this guy to do that. But that really isn't any different than the majority of my career. I mean, look at what happened when Howard Stern was talking about me, when he was the biggest thing there was on radio. Mark McGrath comes on, Howard Stern wants to talk about it, but because Mark McGrath and their management didn't think that I was on the same level, oh, who's Matt Zane? We don't know who he is. And then he even gets called out on the air and he still won't talk about it, but back in the day when Eminem's having issues with people, oh, it's a big feud. Everybody's making money. Everybody's talking about it. Like people never really wanted to give me that same type of respect. They didn't even want to like get involved in the feuds. I mean, I hate to say it because Lemmy is such a beloved character and, all the respect goes to him, an absolute legend, but same thing. He freaking hated me, and it all started because of, backstage sluts, because, the part of the movie I didn't talk about, it was the issue that stemmed from us, from that movie. I talk about that, but I didn't get into the specifics. So, whether it be Criss Angel or Mark McGrath or Lemmy from Motorhead or whoever, ultimately I'm very used to it, and the basic idea is deny until it goes away. And that's just been the thing that's happened to me, time and time again. And that's why, nobody knows about me, like I'm a pretty much a complete unknown, you know what I mean? And that's the other part about the movie that really, I think a lot of people are going to find pretty intriguing. Like, oh my God, look at all this stuff that happened with all these massive people. And I have no idea who this guy is. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's actively people have been suppressing my participation in pop culture now for 25 years.
Well, a lot too, I think, with the Backstage Slut series and some of those names that you mentioned, I think it made you like with their significant to keep the peace at home with whoever their significant others were. Like Matt Zane must have been a no-fly zone. You can't hang out with that dude. He's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, AC Slade talks about it in the movie. He got ruined a relationship by hanging out with me one day. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, there's some of that, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, it's just I'm so used to it now. I mean, what are you going to do? I say it in the movie. I go initially, a lot of the bands were really into it, and then they wanted to be taken out and they wanted to deny it. You know what I mean? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pushback from that. When the movie, finally hits, I'm sure other people are going to get asked about it and they're going to be like, oh my God, this again, like screw this guy. But I mean, my main thing is all in all, I just wanted my story to be told, and I wanted to be told through the lens of shock rock. And why I wanted to I wanted it to be told through shock rock is because of one day in 1993, I'm walking down Hollywood Boulevard and somebody hands me a fanzine of GG Allin. And it was like just this incredible fascination that happened from that point forward. I mean, obviously I was into shock rock prior to that, but that was really like the moment when I found out about him, like in 93.
And then what would you say, like, because you touched on it a little bit earlier about, critics of the music and stuff, but what do you say to critics that say that you needed to do all the extra gimmicks because the music sucked?
I mean, maybe they're right. I mean, what do I know? I mean, I don't know. I think I written some pretty good songs. I've worked with some pretty big artists, I mean, one of the arguments why I included it in the movie was if I'm so talentless and I don't know what I'm doing, why did DMC from RUN-DMC work with me and write songs with me and have me as the primary producer on those songs? It was kind of to prove that, my abilities are probably a little bit more than what I get credited for. But it can go even farther than that. I mean, if you really want to get into the weeds of this thing, and I didn't include it in the movie because yet again, it didn't really fall into the context of the lens that we were viewing it. But, and earlier in my career, Ministry, Al Jorgensen lifted half my band, and he did it by hearing stuff that I did on my albums, like Exit Through Fear. And if you don't believe me, you can go Google it. My band during Exit Through Fear, half of that band went on to play in Ministry at the same time. He directly lifted my guitar player, Sin Karen, and my bass player, Paul Raven, after we recorded this album, Exit Through Fear. And from what I heard, allegedly, it was because of the fact that some of the songs on there were very derivative of Ministry, but he felt that, they would be a good fit because of those songs. What he didn't realize is that I wrote the majority of those songs, so he was really hiring. And I'm not saying that those guys didn't have their input into it, but I also, like, people just thought at the time I was just a vocalist, but they didn't know that I literally played and, actually wrote some of those songs. So, there's another aspect that a lot of people don't realize about my music. If what I did was so horrible and there was no value in it, why did Al Jorgensen, an absolute legend, I love Ministry, lift and take half my band? Like, that's a real thing that happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, people say, oh, Al Jorgensen took Tony Campos from Static X. Oh, but he's Tony Campos. Static X is great. Yeah, he replaced Paul Raven, the guy that Al Jorgensen took from my band. But Society1's a piece of shit. You know what I mean? So, there's another example. So there's like two examples I could say, because I mean, how do you quantify your worth in terms of being a musician? It's subjective. You can do it in terms of sales. Well, then fine, I suck. But I can give you like these other examples where, perhaps the music isn't really, it gets somewhat of a bad rap. Listen, I'm not going to claim that it's, Tool, or, Pantera or anything like that. But I definitely think that it has a little more worth than what we get credit for. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned your work with DMC. I mean, how was that? Because you mentioned at the beginning one of your early influences was RUN-DMC. How was that to be a fan as a kid to then come along and work on a project with him together?
Yeah, I love DMC, RUN-DMC, and my favorite rapper in DMC was DMC. It wasn't Run, it was DMC. And to work with him all of those years later, when I heard his voice on the first track that we did, I cried. I was in the studio. I cried. I couldn't believe it. It was like a dream come true. And the craziest part about that is if you listen to the clip of the song that I included in the movie, those end lyrics that he did was from a very famous RUN-DMC song. He lifted a verse from RUN-DMC to put it in our song that we made together. So it was incredibly special and powerful and unbelievable to me that it happened and it was occurring and things were going on like that. It was horrible when his management got involved and kicked me out of the whole thing. It was I got incredibly depressed about it when it happened, but initially when it was happening, it was so exciting. And let me tell you, like, I remember when he was doing the Grammys in 2020 and he's like literally texting me after he got off the stage from the Grammys, because we were supposed to meet up in LA, to discuss things. Cause at that point we already done a couple of songs, and it was just, it was, man, like the 8-year-old me or 10-year-old me or 12-year-old me or whatever it was. I couldn't believe it. And I still can't believe it. It's like one of the greatest things in my life to be able to work with him and make music with him. But unfortunately, when he was like, yeah, this is great, let's get my management involved. And then, the management got involved, and it was exciting. And then they get on the phone with me. And the first thing they say to me is, how did you gain access to our artist? And I was like, excuse me? I said, aren't we supposed to be talking about like what we're going to do and how we're going to release these songs? And, they were like, yeah, we have other plans. And, this doesn't fit into what we have, scheduled and this and that or whatever. And that was it, and that was devastating. It was absolutely devastating. Mm-hmm. And I knew what they had planned. I mean, if you looked at what happened in their career shortly after that, they did that massive documentary about them. And then they had that show in New York that was in front of like 80,000 people at like a stadium, that tribute show. So I understand where they were going with the band, but man, it was crushing, and my point to them is, hey, look, like, if you don't want my name involved, let me just write beats and write tracks and produce tracks. Obviously DMC likes what I'm doing, but they just wouldn't have it. They were just like, no, fuck off. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Damn. Well, back to the documentary, everyone's going to be able to stream it. It's getting ready to come out here on thunderflix.com on February 14th. It's like kind of a nice little romantic viewing experience with your chick on Valentine's Day. Was that picked on purpose?
Yeah, the company Thunderflix did that. Thunderflix.com. They're like, oh, we got to release this on Valentine's Day. And I'm just at the point now where the mere fact that somebody's willing to put the movie out is, they can do whatever they want. I don't care. We're going to have a premiere out here pretty soon. And they're like, what do you think of this? And I'm like, you guys do whatever you want. The mere fact that you're just doing this, I'm totally into it. Because initially when the movie was done, like, we went to 13 different PR companies. We tried to actually hire them, give them money. And every single one of them, after watching the movie, was like, hell no. We're not going to touch this. A lot of the other people that were initially interested in the movie that saw like the teaser, when they saw the full movie, they're like, nope, we're not even touching this. And thankfully Thunderflix, was willing to do it. So they said Valentine's Day. I said, whatever you guys want to do, I'm totally into it.
Awesome. Now I wanted to ask this too, and this is more like a personal question for you. I'm a guy that's in recovery. 15 years sober right now, but I remember, when I would be chasing all these highs in this lifestyle, and you lived quite a extreme lifestyle for so long. Do you feel that any of all those extremes that you were chasing in that life, has it made you numb to enjoying today and the moment?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I'm not really necessarily that entertained with life anymore, unfortunately. I mean, I miss all of that from back in the day. And, life isn't as fun. It's not, and it's, maybe other people would think that it is, or maybe they matured more, I don't know, but I never really did, I don't have any kids, or anything like that. And my body is still very capable of doing a lot of the same things that it did. And even though I'm a middle-aged man now, so in my mind, I should be living a lifestyle similar to that still, but it's just not possible. It's not possible for a multitude of reasons, just not socially acceptable, but also, the fame of the band just isn't there. You know what I mean? The money just isn't there, So I struggle with it for sure. Because the way I look at it is okay, well, maybe it can't be like what it was, but maybe it should still be like one tour a year, or 2 tours a year or something. But that's just not the case. It's so hard for me to go out and do anything, because any time that I try to do anything, like as you saw from the movie, immediately people are just in there, trying to make sure that it doesn't happen. And even if I can push past that and I get on the road, you saw what happened. That's not fun. I'm not really eager to go out and do that again. That was freaking horrible. You know what I mean? There was no enjoyment in that, So yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's, but it is what it is. Like John Entwistle, the bass player for The Who before he died, people said to him, what's it like? And he's like, dude, I'm too old. I have all this money and all this fame, but I'm too old to enjoy it. And I think that's almost, I don't have enough money and I don't have any fame. But I get what he was saying, like there's a context in when you can enjoy and really like live all that life. And, mine is past and it's just the way that life works. I'm at the point now where it's like, okay, I'm 50 and now I just want to tell my story, and so that's how I kind of get the high, by reliving the life through telling the stories. And when I'm working on these movies and editing, and going back over the footage and crafting the stories, it allows me to revisit it and revisit all my friends, because a lot of the people, even in this last movie, are dead. My bass player, D.V. Karloff, 17 years, he's dead. Wayne Static, friend of 15 years, he's dead. His wife, Tara Ray, who I knew before Wayne, friend for 7, 8, 9 years, dead. So I'm reliving that life. I'm sharing the story. I'm seeing my friends again. And I'm, like revisiting a time that was far more exciting. The last thing I'll say about it is there's a new commercial that Cher just came out in. And she orders a time machine off of, Uber Eats or something. I don't know what it is. And she's like, bring me back to the 80s, So I think like, in the same way, she's worth, $300 million, and looks great for her age and has a 35-year-old boyfriend or whatever. But even she still is like, let's turn back the clock, So I think everybody has those times, and I'm really no different. And nor should I be. I mean, look, like I said, I'm 50 years old. You know what I mean? Most people are dead in another 15, 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, at what point it has to end at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, if this, documentary kind of breathes new life into Society1, I mean, are you still, is there consideration of maybe going back out on the road again, or?
Yeah, I'm always open to the idea of getting back out there, but it's just gotta be somewhat like right. Like I have to make stipulations now when I go out on tour. Like, okay, you can't put me in 1 foot of space on the stage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Don't
like
put baby in the corner.
like that has to be like something that I put in the contract now. You know what I mean? Like, just various things like that. I don't require a lot. I'm not looking for diva treatment, but a foot, you know what I'm saying? Like, my bass player has to be able to put his bass on the stage. You know what I mean? Like the drummer has to go on the stage. He can't go backstage. Like there just has to be, basic things. I mean, I'm totally open to it. I love performing, but it just has to be the right situation. I hope to get back out there, but we'll see.
Yeah, gotcha. Hey, well, before we get ready to wrap up, man, I wanted to ask you a couple of the questions I normally ask my guests that I have on. You mentioned some of your early influences in music, but who would you say today are your top 3 musical artists?
Oh, that's tough, man. My favorite band ever was The Doors. Zeppelin was probably number 2. Loved Floyd. I know those are all old. It just depends on the genre of music. I think my favorite metal band ever is trite as it sounds, is Pantera. Love Pantera. Met Dimebag a couple times. Saw them in their heyday. Love King Diamond. I was sent down to King Diamond. I met him. Love Van Halen. Roth era Van Halen. Met him once at the Rainbow. So yeah, I don't know, man. It just depends on the genre of music. I mean, I listen to a ton of stuff, but a lot of it's old music. I don't like a lot of new stuff, anymore. Probably the newest band that I like that came out is Queens of the Stone Age. And I know that's still technically, 20 years old now. So yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah. And then, looking at things that you've experienced, in life and what you, have kind of documenting this documentary and stuff, what class do you feel should be mandatory for kids today before graduating high school?
What class?
Yeah.
Like in terms of music or just in general?
In general.
Finance.
Like, what do you think society could use?
Finance.
Yes.
Absolute finance. Yeah. Like you got to learn about credit scores and investing and interest rates and possibly stocks and, all that good stuff. Taxes, write-offs.
Yeah, that's the number one answer I get when I ask that question.
Yeah.
And then who are 3 people who've inspired you and you can credit for making you the person you are today?
Definitely probably David Lee Roth, Jim Morrison, GG Allin.
Nice. And then are there any causes or organizations that you support and encourage others to check out?
I don't really have any specific, but 2 things that are closer to my heart than probably anything else is probably addressing food insecurity for people. Number one, if there's any way that you could possibly get involved in that, would be good. And then anything to shelter and get stray and feral cats off the streets.
Nice. And then taking it back to childhood once again, favorite toy as a child?
Oh, who knows? That's a tough one. I don't really remember. I liked all the stuff that kids did in the 80s. I don't know, the Star Wars toys and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't remember my favorite toy. I wish I did. That would be kind of interesting. But yeah, I don't remember.
And then any message that you have for our military members that are currently serving overseas?
Well, I can tell you, thank you. Glad that we're probably in a position now that you're going to be taken a little bit better care of. So that's a really great thing. And I really hope that most of you get to come home, because, I know how difficult it is to be away from home. And it's probably even 10 times more difficult for everybody that are in these places that are somewhat hostile. So I really hope everybody ultimately gets to come home. And for those that were ousted from the military, I'm happy that they get to go back with back pay and to their previous rank. So that's really an amazing, great thing that I think is an absolute positive.
Amen. I agree 100%, man. Sounds like we got a lot more in common too that we could discuss in another episode. But Matt, thank you so much, man, for your time. For any fans out there that are new to hearing about Society1 and want to check out the documentary and just kind of follow you in your career, where would you send them?
Society1band.com. You can just find it all from there, including the movie. You can go everyonediesthemovie.com or society1band.com.
Awesome. Matt, one last favor before I let you go, man. You mind cutting a promo ID for the show? Just introduce yourself, and you're listening to today's Boondoggle.
Hi, I'm Matt the Lord Zane, and you're listening to today's Boondoggle.
Awesome. Matt, I appreciate the time, man. It was great talking with you. And yeah, we'll have to maybe do a follow-up sometime after the release.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, Matt. Take care.
Talk to you later.